Hi everyone, I'm Dale Smith, aka Journo Dale, and we're here to talk about Canadian politics. I saw an interesting piece recently where the Conservatives in the UK are looking to Pierre Poilievre for advice over how to unite the right. Now, for some of you who are unaware, the Reform UK party, led by Nigel Farage of Brexit fame, has been on the rise lately, and a lot of former Conservatives have defected to that party, either sitting MPs or former ones. And this whole interesting thing where you have a bunch of former ministers who are now complaining about the decisions that the Conservatives made when they were the minister in that portfolio who made that decision. Regardless, the Conservatives in the UK are concerned about the fact that, if the right is split, then that gives Labour an advantage and so on. And so they're hoping that Pierre Poilievre can give them advice on what happened in Canada with Stephen Harper and his own uniting the right that happened here. But I would also caution those UK Conservatives to actually read some more history to find out what actually happened, because they might not like the outcome. Now, for some of you who will recall, Brian Mulroney in the early 80s had put together this grand coalition, which included Red Tories from the East Coast, Quebec nationalists, more Red Tory progressive Conservatives in Ontario, and some Western populists. And it created, what was the largest majority government or majority parliament in Canadian history up to that point. And it was spectacular. And then Mulroney got arrogant and tried to think that he could fix the Constitution where Pierre Trudeau failed. And it all came tumbling down after Meech Lake and Charlottetown. And the populist Western part of the voter bloc, or the voting coalition, split off and became the Reform Party. And the Quebec nationalists became the Bloc Québécois. And in fact, the longest sitting MP in Parliament, Louis Plamondon, was originally elected as a Mulroney PC MP, and is now he was one of the MPs who left the PCs to become the Bloc, and he is still a sitting MP to this very day as a Bloc MP. So that split up the vote coalition for the progressive Conservatives, and when Kim Campbell took over, she was just unable to rebuild that coalition, and that's why they went from a majority to 2 seats, and they blame her unfairly for that, but that is beside the point. For our discussion here, the point is that attempts to unite the right went on for a decade at that point. Until the Reform Party became the Canadian Alliance, and then at one point, after Stockwell Day became leader, a number of those MPs became disillusioned. They left the caucus and sat as an independent group for a while until Stephen Harper came in, and at that point, Joe Clark, who was on his second go-around as leader of the Progressive Conservatives, had decided to retire. Peter MacKay became the PC leader on the promise during a delegated convention that he would never, ever merge with the Alliance Party. And he got the delegates he needed based on that promise. And then a week later, he was in talks with Stephen Harper to merge the two parties. And merge is really kind of a polite term. It was almost more of a hostile takeover, in that a lot of those Red Tories were very much made to feel unwelcome in the new broad conservative tent, and they adopted the conservative name, and they hence like to claim that they are the party of Johnny MacDonald, even though they are not. So suffice to say, the Conservatives in Canada did not so much unite the right as the Reform wing of the party eventually took over. And that, I think, is the danger that the UK Conservatives are going to have to face if they want someone like Poilievre, who is very much from the reform wing of the Canadian right wing, if they're looking to him for advice. We could say the same thing in Alberta with what happened with the UCP. Again, you had an amorphous, centrist, progressive conservative party who had essentially run its course, and there was a lot of corruption that was happening in that party, but also everyone got upset because Jim Prentice, who was the premier at the time, told Albertans to basically look in the mirror, the fact that the books were a mess because they wanted no taxes and high levels of public service, which they could fuel with oil revenues for a while, but there was a price crash in 2014. Right around that time, at the time of that election, and Albertans got very upset, wanted to teach Jim Prentice a lesson, and elected Rachel Notley and the NDP because they were the only other viable party. You might also recall at that point that the Wild Rose Party was just under a new leader, Brian Jean, because Danielle Smith, who was the leader at that point, crossed the floor with most of the caucus into the Conservatives as an attempt to unite the right in the province, and that fell apart. And the provincial Liberals were also leaderless because their previous leader was under investigation by Elections Alberta, and he quit. So they didn't even have a permanent leader going into that election. So the only viable party at that point that everyone could point to was the NDP. Rachel Notley won that election. And then Jason Kenney from Ottawa got very, very upset with that and decided that instead of actually taking the time to reflect and for the PC dynasty to do some renewal, do some soul searching, come up with some fresh new policies or ideas, no, Jason Kenney says, we just need to unite the right. And so he engineered the leadership of the PCs then to merge with Wild Rose to become the UCP. Again, it was and during that process essentially chased out all the centrist normies so that you had the more right wing, including the separatists and including the anti-vaxxers and including the far right loons, essentially took over that party because of how Jason Kenney engineered that particular merger with the right. So this is the context by which I think that British Conservatives should really stop and think about whether Poilievre is really the person you want to give you advice for how to unite the right, because the examples in Canada, being both the federal Conservative Party and the UCP in Alberta, have shown that essentially it would be the reform wing who takes over, and things get dumb and crazy from there. I think there's a certain amount of patina that has come over the Stephen Harper years as to, oh, it wasn't that bad. No, it was really bad in a lot of places. And so I think, there are lessons to be learned from history, but the lesson so far in Canada has been that parties who were on the right, who had factioned off into different groups, didn't really take the time to come up with new ideas or something fresh or something that they could actually give to people. It was just sheer mathematics in terms of we just need to come together to win these seats, enough seats to oust the Liberals or the NDP provincially in Alberta. And then you come in with a government who is devoid of ideas. I mean, Stephen Harper had his 5-point his 5 promises, one of which quickly dropped off the face of the planet. The other 4, once they were done, the party became listless and was essentially searching for purpose, and that's why they started doing stupid things like the barbaric practices tip line. So So that's my 2 cents here. The British Conservatives should really take a closer look at what happened in Canada, and that means that they're going to have to, instead of just being in such a hurry to get back into power by any means necessary, maybe take an election cycle and really just come up with something new, something fresh, something that is attractive enough to voters, other than just ousting the party in power, because unless you've got some intellectual or philosophical grounding for what you're doing, other than just we're conservative, then you're going to wind up in trouble. And this has happened in Canada, and that is very likely what could happen in the UK if they don't take this lesson. And that's everything for this week. Join us again next week for some more Canadian politics. I'm Dale Smith. It's at journo_Dale on Twitter and journodale_no_ on Bluesky. And don't forget to like the video, share, subscribe, and support us on Patreon. Thanks, everyone.